This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Thank you again for joining us. Come one, come all from around the world. I'm Daniel Davis, and we've got a wonderful show for you today. As people approach midlife, one of the biggest concerns is not just health to see how long we can live, but that kind of radiant health that we all seek, so that way we can achieve dreams, goals, and still feel ourselves active as though we were still children at play. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program at 70 years is going to be the picture of enduring radiant health. He has cultivated his health through a lifestyle he now shares with audiences around the world. It's a lifestyle that's inclusive of organic plant-sourced foods in their live natural state. It is also a lifestyle that includes regular prana-building exercises such as yoga and qigong. We also talk about spiritual meditation, inspiration, and Shaktipat, which is energetic transmission from a liberated teacher. And I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today someone who's going to be talking about ways we can approach enduring radiant health into the later years. Our guest, Dr. Gabriel Cousens. Dr. Cousens, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Well, Daniel, it's always nice to be on your program. You always do such a nice interview.
Well, good. Well, we always enjoy having great guests such as yourself. You know, you are the founder and you head what is known as the Tree of Life Foundation, which is an excellent source for people who are looking to reverse or at least be able to, get better from things such as diabetes, which it seems everybody out there in the world, kind of has an inside track on that, but it seems more that they're managing it more than actually trying to get people to actually reverse it. And that's got to be very exciting for the work that you've been able to do to help people achieve that.
Yeah, well, my new book is coming out April 9th. There is a cure for diabetes, and we are curing 61% of type 2s in 3 weeks with diet.
Right.
So that's pretty big statistic when you realize that most people are told it's a downhill course from here, and even 21% of type 1s. So, but the key is diabetes is a chronic degenerative syndrome, which is accelerated aging.
Right.
And the same approach I do for diabetes is the same approach that keeps me very, very young and very strong and active at age 70.
Mm-hmm.
It's one and the same.
And that's what's so exciting. I remember as I was, in my youth, and we're talking about late teens, early 20s, and you think about living long, like I hope to live to be 100. At the time, it seemed like there's the finish line, so to speak. That's where I want to get to, but you don't think of until you start getting older is, well, what quality of life will I have when I become that old? And you start to see around you, especially these, poor citizens that end up in senior centers being wheelchaired around, and it's the tapioca at lunch, and then, the medication distribution, just before bedtime, and you think, that's not the way that I want to turn out.
That's right. It's not a very good, very nice way to live.
No, it isn't. And certainly you don't see yourself doing that, I'm sure.
It's not my game plan, let me put it that way.
Well, tell us what radiant, enduring health means. It seems like we're touching on this here a little bit, but describe what that is and how you affect that particular process to be sure that happens.
For me, enduring radiant health, which is a term that I've coined, is you are at full level of radiance, vitality, energy, and strength at any age.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it isn't quite the same. When I was 20, I could do 70 push-ups, and I was captain of an undefeated football team. When I was 60, I did 601. So I have to tell you, I've increased in my radiant, enduring health and strength. But that's an interesting point. But my point I'm really making here is, yes, we can increase it literally at any age. So there's no well, I'm too old to start.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I can tell you that what I experience at 70 is the same amount of vitality in every sphere of my life as I had at 20, and I was in pretty good shape. If you're a captain of an undefeated football team, you're in relatively good shape. You're not a couch potato.
Right. You're at least doing something.
Yeah, well,
Well, I remember, I think it was at least 10 years or better ago that I had read an interview on Jackie Chan, martial arts and film superstar. And at that age, he was about 65, right around there, and he was doing still daily 500 push-ups, 500 sit-ups a day. And so the fact is, there may be in some cases people who may have physical limitations for particular reasons. But for the most part, all of us can achieve that if we just, first of all, make that choice. Does that make sense?
That's exactly my point, is that it's our inherent destiny if we so choose. All of us have the ability to be in a state of enduring radiant health. Now, we don't have to do 500 sit-ups or 600 push-ups or what. That's a whole other level, okay, of let's say super health. But enduring radiant health to me means you are flexible. So I'm going to put when I was 20, I could barely get my hands to about 6 inches above the ground. Now I can put my palms on the ground, okay? Okay, so flexibility is really important because with age, there's a tendency to contract down and lose flexibility. You lose flexibility, you lose adaptability, and adaptability is key for being really healthy. Now, core strength, again, you don't have to be a super strength, but core strength is fundamental in your ability to navigate, your ability to minimize accidents, broken hips, and all those kinds of things, because you have the core strength that really move and hold your balance. So you want enough for core strength. So honestly, I do yoga every day. I love it, and it's good for flexibility. But I also do a certain, just really twice a week, 1 to 2 times a week, some strength training, and then I'm walking, a few miles a day. And that's all. We're not talking about excessive.
Right.
For what I'm talking about, because that isn't the goal of my life. I'm not a martial arts star. My thing is to be totally functional. I'm working all the time. I have programs all over the world, as well as what I have at the Tree of Life Center U.S. So I need to be on, okay? And I need to be able to go not infrequently 12 hours a day, full speed, full concentration, full focus, which many younger people can't do.
And that's an amazing thing to talk about right there, because it's been incredible in the last 10 years, and I just keep using the decade block there, but why not, to hear young people, and we're talking teenagers a lot of times,
definitely,
who always talk about how tired they are.
Yeah.
And you kind of wonder, what is the cause of this? Because it's not like they do any more than we did at that age. In fact, sometimes I feel like perhaps they're doing less.
I think they're doing less, and I think that they're really depleted for a variety of reasons, yeah.
And what kind of conclusions can you draw from that? Just maybe a couple. Because this actually permeates into people who later on...
Well, I think that the prevalence of junk food, of genetically engineered food, high amounts of sugar, higher than ever before, are some of the big players that we're looking at, and just in terms of diet. I also don't think there's much emphasis on physical activity versus sitting in front of a computer. Those are huge liabilities that the kids are taking on in the whole picture. So I think that there's too much, let's say, passive entertainment. The research shows that the men who have 19 hours a week in front of computers, TVs, or whatever, really actually have a 150% increase in the amount of diabetes they get.
Wow.
So, there is an accelerated aging and weakness, but I also think that the simple total amount of sugar and junk food in the diet is way more than what I was exposed to.
Well, there's that, my understanding too, and there was also a documentary that I just recently watched called King Corn, And, here they're making mountains of this stuff, and they've got to figure out, well, where do we put all this? That permeates into a lot of our diet, but then they also break it down and they make the corn syrup, which is a form of sugar that goes into a lot of processed food as well.
Well, the increase in high fructose corn syrup is 2,100%, and since 1909, so it's a huge increase. It's directly related to diabetes, and the truth is, this stuff really accelerates the aging process. It accelerates all levels of health degeneration, and including something most people don't know about, non-alcoholic fatty liver degeneration. It's the main cause of that as well. So we have huge problems with the high fructose corn syrup, plus it's GMO'd. So it's a disaster.
Yeah, it doesn't even sound good.
Yeah, and so we're,
so much for that buttered corn with a little salt on the front wooden porch in a country home.
Right. And so I think the kids are really exposed in a way that we just weren't. I mean, we just weren't exposed to.
So you can tell just by what we're talking about here briefly for the listeners is that diet really plays an incredible role, but on the other hand, as we talked about earlier, there is a choice there.
Yeah. There's a few. Your brain function's really key, and diet makes a huge role. I'm going to say one more thing about the fructose story. They did research on fructose and glucose. Glucose actually improved brain activity by 20%. Fructose depressed it by 20%.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're saying is, this is affecting your mind too, not just your body. And it's 10 times more inflammatory than glucose, which is in itself quite inflammatory. And inflammation is the driving force behind all chronic degenerative disease. So I don't have any of it. I will not eat anything with any, high fructose corn syrup. I minimize the glucose intake significantly. Those are big players in radiant health, and that's kind of a key thing. And the other thing in my diet, it's a high percentage of live food, 95%, but people that go 80%, they can do really well, well. And they have vitality because those are my clients. Those are the people who come to me as I put them on this diet, and in a few months, their life changes. Their vitality, their clarity of mind, which is no small thing after 50 for most people, improves significantly. And those are key things. So diet plays a big role. And basically, I don't focus so much on the low-fat diet because we need a certain amount of cholesterol to make our brains work. And the research is not showing that cholesterol up to 260 has any effect on heart disease. That's newer research, I call newer the last 30 years, and certainly solidified in 2009 when the Archives of Internal Medicine really came out and said, there's no evidence whatsoever in the last 30 years of research that there's any link. Now, I say that because there is a link of low cholesterol linked with depression and accidents and mental disturbance. So telling people don't worry about the cholesterol. People need the fat and they need the omega-3s for proper brain function. You need the long chain omega-3s for really optimal mental functioning. So that's an important piece too, because we aren't just talking about optimal body, we're talking about optimal mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then you need high quality minerals, and again, these are natural sources that you may want to go to, including natural mine of salts that are good, and then high amount of greens and vegetables. But I want to also emphasize the protein. Mm-hmm. Because people don't get enough protein, all their function kind of goes down. You can adequately get it on a vegetarian diet. Now, I'm going to make another little point. Why do I say vegetarian? What's wrong with meat protein? Well, there is some problems here. What we're learning about is definitely it shortens your lifespan by, between, depending on the quality of the meat, 10 to 20%. That's a significant amount off your lifespan. Second thing we're seeing is that the animal fat, which is usually cooked, actually causes a little bit of a disruption of your large and small intestine, and bacteria get in, your own bacteria, and their toxins get into the system and actually inflame the arteries. So we see an artery inflammation as a result of this that, again, decreases the health. There's research out of China, which was fascinating, is that in the vegan diet, they found that the inside lining of the arteries was 1/2 as thick. In other words, I want to say that's not that's a good thing. The thickened intima actually creates less quality of artery functioning. So these are things that we're beginning to see. It's like, well, this isn't so good. So I think when you look at longevity, we know that vegans, people do not eat meat, fish, chicken, or dairy. Vegan men live 7.42 years longer. Vegan women live 3.2 years longer. I don't know why there's a differentiation. But point being, and the important point being in this, is that people who do a plant-based diet do indeed live longer in both sexes and have less chronic disease. So that's a key, because you want to be vital. You want your arteries to be clean and healthy and good. So you need a certain amount of protein. I recommend, generally speaking, from my research with my diabetics, depending who you are, 10 to 25% of your diet being protein, 25 to 45% being natural plant-based fat, with an emphasis on the long chain omega-3s, and somewhere between 25-45% being the natural carbohydrate. And I don't mean corn syrup. I don't mean white sugar. I mean, your vegetables and a little bit of fruit. And that was the diet that, with that broad range, people did just well on. But it was natural, it was organic, very important. Mm-hmm. Very important, because what you have when it's not organic, that means you could be having GMO in the food, pesticides and herbicides. And we know pesticides and herbicides are neurotoxins. We know that people who are exposed to pesticides and herbicides have 7 times more Parkinson's disease and other neurological diseases. Well, these are not accidents. You take neurotoxins, you're going to have a toxic effect on your nervous system. We don't, that's by definition. So when you go organic, you're minimizing all those potentialities. Irradiated food, GMO food, pesticides and herbicides. So you're getting the highest quality food. At the Tree of Life, we guarantee 100% organic food. And when I mean we guarantee it. Now, a lot of people say, oh, we do organic. Well, people don't ask, well, what percentage? Yeah, well, occasionally we have an organic carrot in our soup,
it said organic on the label.
Right. But what I mean is that restaurants and so forth, or retreat centers, they don't really guarantee 100%. They have some organic food. And there's a little bit of sometimes integrity issues there, too, where they're saying one thing and doing another. There's a famous restaurant in Boston area. It's like they said 100% organic. What the truth was, it was all commercial food. Mm-hmm. How do I know? Because one of our staff had worked there and said, I can't do this anymore, and they had to quit. But my point is, we do guarantee 100%, and that's probably what makes us unique in all the kind of vegan life food retreats, or maybe all the retreats in the country. There's no place you can get 100%, but I think it's extraordinarily important because you don't want to take poisons in your system that are going to deplete your long-term and really short-term vitality, and therefore your enduring radiant health.
Now, Dr. Cousens, we have approached this particular topic, especially when it comes to food and diet, many times over the course of 9 years, and it's really, I think, encouraging to know that we're moving into a day and age where people, they still shop at the supermarket, but they're becoming more intelligent about their choices. You can't just simply stamp, sustainable practices and, organic 100% whole food, so to speak, and expect people to believe this. And you're seeing, especially in the Northwest where I live, is a wonderful surgence of basically local community sustainable agriculture and farmers markets. Now, what I wanted to point out is, that you're pointing to the vegetarian diet, which is a great way, but, there are other people that sometimes have a problem with it, and I think it's not because it's the diet itself. Sometimes it's the people behind the diet that beat, the meat eaters over the head, with a stake saying, this is wrong, you're sinning. Kind of like, people who were too ultra-religious and they believe in God, you don't. You know what I'm talking about there?
Of course.
And it's fascinating when you think of the history of mankind that we had meat in our diet. The difference, though, is, because we actually had on the program someone who was talking about a paleo diet. That's interesting because you see the cave art. We've got celebration, you're hunting animals. They had animal protein in their lifestyle. The difference being, though, is that this was something in celebration and this was something in small amounts. Occasionally they would smoke, and it was used that because in some cases it was through the wintertime. Now, you take a look at Africa, for instance, and they eat meat. In fact, it was funny because we had a guy who wrote a book on his first 100 marathons, and he talked about how he was in Africa, and he says these people really eat and love their meat. And their version of vegetable was a chicken, which I thought was pretty funny. But the fact is, how do you address that when people, are meat eaters, I guess, and, and taking a look at that in context?
Well, it's an interesting question. I've kind of just shared the statistics of longevity, okay?
Right.
And these are American statistics, okay? Now, I have actually programs. I have centers in Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana, and Ethiopia. Okay? And we're feeding really thousands of people. So the question is, what are they? Well, mostly they eat vegetarian, okay? And they occasionally eat, as you say, in a celebration.
They have meat. Okay.
Yeah. And so really when you really look at what goes on, it's not this heavy meat-eating group of people. Okay? And so that's my impression. Now, there's vegetarian restaurants wherever you go. None of this is hard, but the general food, okay, and is you got your beans and you got your bread, okay, and you have your vegetables, but they're limited vegetables because of how they growing, so, and they have the fruit, lots of fruit. So, practically speaking, meat is really for the wealthy.
Okay.
And for celebration primarily. Now, there's a few other things. What was then wasn't now, and that's a key concept. For example, we know that with Fukushima and other kind of radiation leaks, which are really going on all over the world, that the amount of radiation in animals is somewhere between 15 to 30 times higher because it's concentrated as it goes up the food chain. This is the same with pesticides and herbicides. So when you're eating meat now, you're eating a whole lot more radiation taking that into your system than when you're eating low on the food chain. So for sustainability now, the game has changed in that the higher you eat up in the food chain, the more radiation, the more pesticides and herbicides you're going to take. They didn't have that even 100 years ago, forget 30,000 years ago. So I think that there is a level of confusion when people say, well, yeah, Paleolithic diet, but that's true, and it did work. In some cases, that was all the food they had. I do want to make a point that the history suggests from the Garden of Eden and for 6,000 to 4,500 years ago, which is that range, it was all vegetarian. When you looked at what the Egyptians ate, and I have pictures of it, they were pretty much 100% live food from 6,000 to 4,000 years ago, 4,500. Then the climate changed. So there are times, according to the climate, that things change. So when you're in an ice age, well, what else are you going to eat? I mean, how many vegetables grow? So all these discussions,
like the Eskimos, for instance.
Yeah, they have limited kind of discussion if you see a historical context.
Mm-hmm.
So we go to where pretty much the whole world, as far as I can tell, was basically live food vegetarian. It was easy. It was literally a Garden of Eden, the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
High levels of humidity, right sunlight, everything was just perfect, and that lasted for 1,500 years. Then things shifted a little bit. Then you have the flood. So these history-based arguments have some limitations.
Yeah.
In the discussion. So I kind of say, well, what's now? What's now is we have food that's basically contaminated, higher up in the food chain, more radiation, more pesticides and herbicides. We're studying the GMO animals now. It's like the fish have lots of radiation. It isn't really a good choice because of the other conditions, besides of the fact of the inflammation factor and things like that, and the just gross fact that it takes 10 to 20% off your lifespan. So those are the facts now. They weren't maybe the facts 30,000 years ago.
Right.
But we're not living then.
Right.
And so that's the trouble. And people don't kind of get that we're not 30,000 years ago. And we're not living in an ice age.
Well, and it's like you said also, the meat diet or the cornerstone was kind of the rich man's diet, if you will. And, and people have adopted this where here's the meat, okay, and then we're going to go ahead and surround that with everything else. And it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah,
and usually, even in those societies, it was more of a condiment.
Right.
It wasn't really the main thing. And I think that's an important thing, too. It was something that got mixed into the vegetable.
Mm.
So, again, people say, well, yeah, what does that mean? Does that mean an 8-ounce steak or a 16-ounce steak? Or does that mean a little bit as a condiment in your food because it was still scarce?
Fascinating stuff. Now, another thing, too, is having a sense of belonging. There isn't any real reason to feel like I want to live to be 125 if you don't have a sense of belonging and participation, maybe even a spiritual life as well. How would you address that for people?
Well, in the total picture of longevity, the research really suggests that people who have a belief in God of some sort do indeed live longer. Okay? The research also suggests that people who have a social context and are connected to people, not just relationship, which also is associated with enhanced longevity, but community relationships and social relationships also live longer. So there's very good evidence in a lot of different studies that really suggests that longevity is a social is positively associated with your social life. And actually, there's some interesting research that people who attend church live longer, but the reason is because of their social groups. That's what they figured out.
Well, that, and think about it, church, if you really enjoy where you're going, and that's going to church. I myself didn't like it growing up because for one thing, why do they have to have wooden benches? Can't you make it a little more comfortable? But that's
right.
just me. But it gives you something to look forward to. It's like that moment where as a kid maybe you didn't like going to school so much, and then you started getting into your preteens, and, I can't wait to get to school and talk to my friends, so you look forward to it. You didn't like going to class maybe, but you had something to look forward to. And I think that's the key, is that each day, that the day before you think, I've got something to look forward to move forward, so to speak. That's pretty important, isn't it?
It's very important.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes us to another piece of the enduring radiant health, is meaning and purpose in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm at 70, and I'm actually just beginning a whole set of humanitarian projects. We have our center, Tree of Life Center U.S., which is like this vegan, live food, spiritual, holistic retreat, which is kind of, in the sense, moving as a boutique kind of place for people to visit and get the best food and experience the whole lifestyle. That's a project. Speaking and teaching, writing books, but now the humanitarian. So there's always a life purpose and meaning, and that is definitely associated with increased vitality. And again, let's say purpose in life is connected to longevity.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at diet plays a role, life purpose plays a role, social relationships play a role, belief in God. All of those play a role in the bigger picture of this enduring radiant health. And then, of course, exercise, as was mentioned. So,
well, you have to feel good if you're going to do anything.
That's right. And you want that full vitality so you can really be optimally effective.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's something that you might help our listeners maybe address, is the fact that sometimes as we get to an age, and this can be for some people, you get to midlife, you think you've done quite a few things, and usually those lives, at times you really take a look and say, well, you really haven't done much of anything but fantasize about the things that you want to do. But that being said and set aside, is that there's a sense sometimes that, well, what more is there? I mean, how much could you travel? How much could you do this? I don't know that those will be any new experiences for me. So they get to a point where they feel the inertia of staying still. What do you like to do to help guide yourself to say, what's next for me, so to speak? Because you talked about, belief in God, which, the spiritual practice. How do you say, for instance, what's next for me on the horizon should you come to that point, that you might be able to give to our listeners as sort of a guiding point, Show me the way, so to speak.
Sure. Life purpose is, again, important. Now, how do you access your life purpose at that phase in your life?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you're a teenager, you have a different life purpose, and when you're 50, when you're 70, you have a different life purpose than when you were 50, and so forth. And for me, the key is, I'm going to say, inner guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always been, through my life, through prayer and through meditation, the door opens to the world of inner guidance. And usually you're directed. Mm-hmm. But now, if the door isn't open and you're too busy watching TV or playing with the computer, it's really hard to have that access. So I do recommend to my clients that they do daily meditation and daily prayer, which helps the door open to that guidance.
And most important, I would think, learning to listen and attention would be very valuable as well.
Well, the way I define it, prayer is speaking to God, meditating is listening to God.
Ah, there you go.
But it's good to do both. And, you're speaking and you're opening and then you have to have some quiet to be able to hear. So you talk on the phone, you talk, I'm listening. I talk, you're listening. There has to be a play there. And so the meditation is a way of listening to the divine. And that's where you get your direction. I call it the wisdom of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, I decided to do that because intellectually I'm reading the book. That's a good thing. There's a wisdom of the heart that kind of guides you from a heart-centered place, which is accessible through meditation and prayer.
Now,
which is more accessible, to put it that way.
There you go. I think sometimes, again, we get so caught up in the noise of the world. There's the conditioning as we grow up, what people tell us we should be doing, so you spend a fair amount of your lifetime seeking approval and acceptance. That when it comes to the point that you're at midlife, and this is not everyone, but for some people, is that, well, now I'm too old to do anything about life now that I've finally decided to cast the gauntlet down and say, I've had it with acceptance and approval. I want something for me. Then you get out there and you start, maybe going after that a little bit or a lot, depending, and you meet with disappointment and you revert back to the old beliefs that, see, I told you so, and if you still want acceptance and approval, maybe you should go back to the way you were doing things, the way we liked you in the first place. And, it kind of becomes one of those self-defeating circles that you find yourself caught in, and that's where you suggest, hey, settle down, get quiet, listen in meditation, and move forward on what comes to you, and trust in your instincts.
Exactly. And really you move to be an inner-directed person, and then you see that the real love, joy, and peace in your life comes from within yourself rather than from outside. Mm. That's the key concept there.
Now, tell us, Dr. Cousens, what's happening that is new at the Tree of Life Foundation?
Well, there are two things. We really have two. We have the Tree of Life Foundation, which is doing a tremendous amount of humanitarian work, really around the world, but a lot of it is in Africa. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm speaking with a little bit more authority about what people eat, because I've been there. Yeah. I'm going there regularly. I know what people are eating.
They're not hunting lions like they show on television.
They're not hunting lions. No. That's an old line, so to speak. And then we have the Tree of Life Center U.S., and really four things are happening here. One is that we're creating ourselves as a boutique, 100% live food, but 100% organic, which, as I say, is really, really important. We may be the only ones in the country who can actually say that's the case, because we're mostly growing our own food. Mm-hmm. Okay, so organic, live food, holistic spiritual retreat center. So people can do what they want. We have activities. We have this. We're out in nature. There's a lot of bird watching. There's a lot of hiking. There's lots of things for people to do. We do not have TVs. Okay, there's no TVs in the room. There's a reason. We want people to turn inward, not just do the same old things. Okay, so that's important. So we're focusing on kind of relabeling ourselves as that boutique, and we're cutting down our room size. We're only doing 12 rooms, and minimizing the people here, so it's very, very personable. And in this thing, we have lots of things during the day. We have food preparation courses. We have spiritual discussions at night if people are interested. We have hiking. People can be part of the veganic, look at the organic farming, or just hang out. It's just very beautiful. It's considered the fourth cleanest air in the country, so it's like really nice. We're at 4,100 feet, so is very, very nice. So that's a focus. Now, in addition to that, we're a teaching center. So we have a master's program in live food nutrition, and we have people at all different ages that take that, because a lot of people take the course who just like, I'm interested. I just want to learn more about this. I want to learn how to do it, okay? So they can learn the conscious eating approach and the low glycemic approach and so forth. We also have a master's program, the first one in the world, in veganic organic farming. So people can kind of tune into that. We also have an apprentice program in the kitchen. We just have 3 apprentices for 6 months. We limit that because we really want people to be really trained. Then, that's one thing. Then we have programs. We have programs in diabetes prevention. We have a general 21-day rejuvenation program of kind of tuning in, resetting, and for some people, learning for the first time what this whole lifestyle is about. It takes a little bit of time, so our 21-day program is really good for that. But people can also take a section of that. They can take that conscious eating section or the 0 Point, which is a psycho-spiritual course, or just come for the 7-day green juice fast, which is extremely rejuvenating for people. It's really a winner. Probably one of the most important things people can do is do a green juice fast once or twice a year. It really is great for improving one's general health and well-being. So all those are going on. Or they can just simply come for a retreat. So we have many levels of teachings and of experience according to whatever people would like. You know, the retreat, a lot of people come from the retreat and say, well, that's interesting. Maybe next time I'll take a fast, or next time maybe I'll take this 21-day program. Now, another thing we do is I do what I call a whole person healing. It takes about 2.5 hours, and it's a very in-depth, personal, one-on-one, where I'm really tuned in on all the imbalances and ways people can really upgrade their life. And that's a very, you have to have, let's say, a certain intent to really want to love yourself enough to want to heal yourself to engage in that program. So those are the different levels, but the whole person healings are going on all year round, obviously when I'm here. So that's those are the many levels of what is happening.
Very exciting, and I also like how people may come there and they'll start with a simple thing as a retreat, and the next thing you know, they decide, I'm going to take one step at a time and go to the next level and the next level. And I think to achieve any reasonable, especially long-term goal, just take it like that, one step at a time where you enjoy doing it instead of going all out, as you were suggesting earlier about exercise. People tend to, they want to jump in and overwhelm themselves, and then they quit. Well, you're not going to keep doing something that you don't enjoy.
We really recommend to everybody, go at your own pace.
Right.
Have a good time, because that's also part of longevity, is you're having a good time and you're smiling.
Exactly.
And it's really another part is this humor and joy in life actually really makes a difference. It makes all the neurotransmitters, amplify your sense of well-being.
Now, if you can, for our listeners, what is your website?
It's drcousens.com.
drcousens.com. Doesn't get any easier than that.
Doesn't get any simpler than that. That's right.
Well, Dr. Cousens, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. You lay out the basics, and it's really now, again, as we said earlier in the program, now it's a choice. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. And what we offer is going from the very basics to the very sophisticated.
There you go.
And people can go at whatever level they want. We can have the most sophisticated levels of people with lots of education, and then we can get, and we'll have a broad base for people who are like, what is this about? And they can feel comfortable in that experience too, because we have a lot of, let's say, we call it mishpacha, we call it family, where people meet, 3 times a week, where they just gather and talk, as guests. So we have a lot of guest support. That's part of what we think is really important. We want people to feel really part of what's going on.
Well, Dr. Cousens, again, thank you for joining us here on the program today. Very exciting.
Daniel, it's always nice to speak to you, and thank you for the good work you're doing. It's just really good that people 50 and over are getting some attention.
Yeah. Instead of putting out the pasture, so to speak.
Yeah, some of us are, that's the last thing in their mind is being put out the pasture.
Right.
But it's good to eat green food, so maybe that's kind of being put out the pasture.
Thank you again, Dr. Cousens.
Okay. Have a good week, everybody, and blessings to everybody, and have a really good year.
Thank you so much.
Happy Valentine's Day.
You betcha. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. There you go. You've got more information for you to act on, and you can also act on jumping on your keyboard and going to beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We'll have a hot link there so you can find out more about the work at Tree of Life. Again, drcousens.com is the website. You can find out more. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Remember, live your day past halfway.